Good morning. I'm saying good morning because we are pre-recording this morning. This is the Race and Lanes podcast. I'm your host, Rico Muhammad. I will be joined shortly by my co-host, Mr. Chuck Snow. And we have a good friend of the show joining us again. It's been a little while since we've had him on, Mr. Tommy Ruke. I affectionately have dubbed Tommy as our resident insurance expert. And just anecdotally and from personal experience over the past couple of months, I got some questions I want to throw at Tommy because, man, it seems like I got a truck that has a magnet on it, and everybody seems to want to touch it, hit it, or whatever. But hopefully we can get some answers. I got some questions I want to throw out there that I think that everyone wants to pay attention to, and may helps everyone else along the way. Let me bring in my co-host really quickly, Mr. Chuck Snow. Good morning, Chuck. How are you?
Good morning. How are you, Rico? We're doing this week's show. We're pre-recording it because I'm on my way to Matt's on Tuesday night, so we won't be able to do it live. I'm looking forward to getting down to Louisville. And if you are listening to Sirius XM on Thursday morning, I think around 9:30 Eastern time, our friend Dean Croak and I will be guests on the Dave Nemo show. So if you're listening to your Sirius XM, turn it on to 146 and you will be able to hear what we're talking about, which I don't know what we're going to be talking about yet, but it's always great to talk to Dave.
Absolutely. Well, without any further ado, I don't want to keep our esteemed guests waiting in the wings too long. We want to welcome back to the show, good friend of the show, Mr. Tommy Ruke. Good morning, Tommy. How are you?
Doing well, Rico and Chuck. By the way, Chuck, they already played this Tuesday night. I'm sorry. I'm going to be on the same show you are on Monday, but that's beside this. This is going to be Tuesday night, so it's a day late. But anyway, I'm just thinking the same thing. How you guys doing?
We're doing
good.
We're doing great. It's always good to have you on the show. You know so much, and I want to share with our listeners. Tommy, for many years, has been our guest when it comes to truck insurance. He's probably the number one guy in the United States. They call him Professor Truck Insurance, and they call him that for a reason. But Tommy's taken on a new role. He felt that truck insurance was doing okay, and he did what he could. But besides for doing that, Tommy has become a fraud fighter now. And Tommy's taken up, and you know what? Not a second too late, because he's a champion of our industry and our community. He saw we were having a problem with truck insurance, which we still are, but it is what it is. But now we have a bigger problem, ladies and gentlemen. We have fraud. We have fraud at every single turn, everywhere. And it's just rampant. It's like having an infestation of rats. And it's hit the big guys. It's hit the little guys, from the biggest third party and asset-based carriers to the smallest brokers and one truck operators. Everybody has had an experience with fraud. It's out of hand. And Tommy is going to lend his expertise. He's asked me to join a group with him, which I'm gladly doing. But Tommy, I want to find out more about what you're doing as far as fraud. This is we need people like you in our industry to save it from these fraudsters.
Chuck, thank you for introducing that part. There's two things involved in this. The fraud task force, it's dealing with three different things: cargo theft, money theft, and people stealing somebody else's DOT number in the fraudulent areas. And we're going to try to address all that. I didn't put this program together, but I have a couple relationships like I have with you who started this program. I've only had a couple meetings, but we're serious doing three things. We're still staying abreast of the government. And Chuck, we have our friend, the lawyer, Hank Soden, is involved in it too, doing the legal part of it. And the other guys here, especially in inventing the motor carriers and the brokers who they do business with. They brought me on for a couple of reasons. First, the part of the insurance, because one of the fraudulent areas is fraudulent certificate insurance is sent to brokers or shippers, and we're going to talk about those things. The other thing is I've also developed a situation where for a very low annual fee, a trucker can get two things that are very important to them. They can get their CSA scores on a monthly basis. The reason that's important is that the number one thing about insurance, Rico, you talked about your insurance having a problem. The number one thing that drives insurance today is your public profile, which is your CSA scores. And a lot of smaller motor carriers do not take the time to check those things. So we come up with a system where they get it every month. It changes every month. And so if they see some areas coming up or down, they can address them before it becomes a problem with the insurance carrier. But more important than that, Chuck, we also will send them an email the day they have an inspection or a crash to see if that vehicle that got inspected under the DOT number is their vehicle or not.
Right.
Because if it's not their vehicle, then somebody stole their DOT number. It won't be foolproof because the vehicle has to be inspected, but it'll give them a chance to get involved in that early on and maybe even stop it before it goes into the system itself, because they could call, because a reporter show where it was inspected, the officer who wrote the inspection up, so we can help them then call that officer and say, it wasn't us, it wasn't my vehicle, before it goes. A lot of times, Chuck, and you've seen it here, if your insured develops a bad CSA scores, they can't get loads anymore. They can't get insurance anymore.
That's
and
right.
It's too late to wait until somebody finds out about it and starts blackballing them. So those are three things I'm bringing to this new equation, this new program we got involved, plus my knowledge of insurance for certificate insurance and help in those areas.
Can I, before we move on, I got a couple of questions along those lines, if you don't mind. For people that are listening in that have, this was important because I just had someone reach out to me maybe last week, and they had just gotten fired from a job, and they was asking me if I knew anybody that was hiring. And the reason that they got fired was because they were got put out of service down in your neck of the woods, Tommy, down in Florida, for going over falsifying laws, I guess you would say. Even with the electronic laws, they still were falsifying laws or whatever. So they ran into a problem where they got fired. Now, as an individual, when they're dealing with an individual, I understand the company, but when you're dealing with an individual that has a history of, let's say, going awry of the law or having bad inspections, what does that do not only for that individual, but also for another company that may bring that person on?
Well, a couple things that I hope the audience understands this. Every time they get inspected, that information goes into two databases. The trucker, the carrier MSS system and the driver MSS system. And future new employer can see who the driver drove for, or at least got inspected under the last 3 years and crashes for 5 years. And if they show up here where they're doing something like that, then most motor carriers don't want to hire them anymore, just because they're not following the law. From an insurance standpoint, the reason CSA is so important is two things. The first off, the plaintiffs use it against us. For example, the example you gave here, if for some reason they have a crash, right, and for some reason that crash is marginal, the plaintiff attorney is going to bring up, well, you hired a driver that had preponderance for driving too long, therefore they're fatigued, so put some dollars to it. And right. So this is the problem we have here. The reason it's important in insurance is, besides just the plaintiff's attorney, those are things the motor carrier can control. If they're not controlling their driver's hours of service, the driver's wearing their seatbelt, the driver reporting claims, the driver living within the speed limit, if they don't put some efforts to control those things, then the insurance company doesn't want to insure a motor carrier who isn't controlling those things. Lastly, the most important hire a motor carrier has is the driver and the driver profile. And so we're looking for motor carriers who hire the drivers. Now, the insurance industry does not see the PSP. It's only the motor carrier who's hiring the driver. So we don't see that. We just have to trust the motor carrier that they're onboarding drivers and selecting drivers that meet these criteria.
Right, right. And speaking on, here's something here in Georgia. I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, Tommy, or not. We're talking about insurance, but they just passed some
Right.
type of tort reform up this way for Georgia. Do you know anything about that?
I know they've just passed it. I know Georgia became like Florida was before Florida passed the law, very similar to Georgia, that it was being very difficult to defend cases in Georgia. But the relevant parts of all these new state laws, because this has to be controlled at the state level, is they're making it where if a driver can prove that they're not negligent, and how do they do that? They have cameras in their truck and they can see that they were not negligent, then the other side can't bring the CSA and all this other stuff into the equation. In Florida, they can't even pursue a plaintiff can't pursue a damage here if the four-wheeler caused a crash. Georgia wasn't quite that far, but at least the data can't be. And another thing the lawyers do is they board medical expenses, not medical expenses they'll never be paid, just to run the bill up. So all the state tort reforms, Florida's done it, Texas has done it, Georgia's done it, a number of states here are doing those things, as well as capping the most that the plaintiff attorney can ask for non-compensatory damages. There's two types of damages here. Compensatory damage are things, here's a bill. My insured doctor paid. I need reimbursement for that because it was the accident made me go to the doctor, the hospital, emergency room. Second, I've lost wages here, so I can recover their wages. Those are things we can actually look at. The other ones that everybody's heard, this pain and suffering, things like
Right.
here, mental stress and all those. Those are what the states are capping. There's only so much they're allowing that you can collect in those non-compensatory areas. But again, they're addressing the compensatory areas by making the plaintiff's attorney to show actual medical bills, not medical bills. Now, it wouldn't surprise everybody listening to us that there are a number of attorneys out there who go to the doctor and say, "Doctor, look, charge me the most you can for this treatment. I won't pay you all this, but I'll give you a little more here if you get this part of it here, just so they can claim more." Those things won't happen anymore. They're going back to what most of the insurance industries use what is reimbursement under Social Security and Medicaid as a guide of what's a reasonable medical treatment for certain things. So they're having they have to use those discounted or at least factual what a particular procedure costs in here. And so the states have to. It's driving the trucking industry wild. One of the reasons that you have the trucking insurance has increased is because we're paying these dollars.
Right.
And what you might say, well, I've never had this. But the problem you have when you listen to us is that when used to be a $50,000 claim is now a $500,000 claim because of the fear of these kind of things. And
Right.
insurance companies don't tend to fight it as much because of the problem of the bad faith, which we don't want to get into here. That means the insurance company has an obligation to settle the claim within the limits of their policy to protect the insured. If they don't settle the claim within the limits of the policy to protect the insured, and for some reason the jury gives a judgment above the policy limits, the insurance company is obligated to pay above the policy limits because they acted, quote, in bad faith by not settling the claim within their limits. So this has driven all these cases up in this area. And you know what's ridiculous about this? That I'm not going to get in politics at all, but we talk about the tariff, we talk about inflation, these things. You know who pays for all this?
We do.
We do.
Everybody who's buying groceries, everybody who's buying milk. I mean, this is because it's got to be passed on. Sure. I get so upset when I see these billboard attorneys, these attorneys that go on TV. Oh, I won this case. It's not a win case. People deserve to be paid if they're injured by any auto, an auto crash or any crashes. It's all these other things. And by the way, just statistically, and the statistically is still true, Rico, is that 70 to 75%, depending on the study, of every crash involving a four-wheeler and an 18-wheeler is the four-wheeler's fault.
Exactly. Yep. So just another question to follow up real quickly, and then we can switch gears. I got another question that may pertain to the fraud situation. So having this go into effect, has this had any effect on helping insurance premiums at all, or is it too early to tell?
It's all too early. because we have had the court cases. I always say in my past teaching, and I still do some teaching and consulting work, that you never know what the policy says, or you know not what the law says until some judge tells you. So it depends on how they're going to interpret until you get court rulings. But it has opened up the marketplace. There are more insurance companies who are willing to write in Florida now and take the risk in Florida. So as long as you increase competitiveness, then yes, it will reduce or at least level insurance companies' premium consideration. But the rule that you're insured, that we listen to this no matter what size they are, and drivers too, because they have to worry about their profile with the government, because who they are driving for will also affect this. And if the company they drive for gets in a bad situation, they're going to lose their job, or it's going to cost them money. They just got to check their CSA scores. They got to make sure they live with that. In your case that you brought out, the driver falsified a log. Well, part of that could be the motor carrier's fault for not explaining to the driver. Typically, a falsified log has to do with the misconception of personal conveyance, where you move and you don't go to the next direct location. You go one that's on your route and things like this, right. Or a yard move, just trying to as they quantify their activities between the on duty, off duty, yard move, personal conveyance. But they just got to be careful about that stuff, Rico. That's the problem we have.
Right.
Tommy, what's the worst state still out there out of all of them for litigation against truckers?
The Southeast is the worst. Again, Florida, Georgia, it's still there. You get some bad judgment because Illinois actually their tort reform did not do any danger. They did not change things up there. And then California is also very bad. Those are the basically three. Texas was bad, but Texas, again, just talk about this. They passed tort reform 3 years ago, but they just passed another one to even make it tougher. Texas is in the legislation. Their legislation meets every 2 years, and they're in there right now. And they've passed 3 or 4 good laws. By the way, one other law that they passed was more, as Florida has too, predatory towing, where these things. So Florida, Michigan, Maryland is the leading cause of that, the predatory towing. Rico, I don't know what size of truckers are listening to you. I'm sure it's a lot of small motor carriers, fiber truck. They've got a greater chance of going out of business because they bought the wrong cargo policy, or they wrote the wrong physical damage policy, predatory towing, than they ever will nuclear verdicts.
That's interesting, because this was the question that I wanted to bring to you. It seems like, I don't know, Tommy. My truck seems to have a big neon sign that says "Hit me."
It's orange, isn't it?
This is no joke. This is no joke. I have had in the past month, I've had equipment, either a truck or a trailer, that has been hit in the past month 4 times.
Wow.
And it's been parked every time. I was at a dock I was loading at a facility. They had a yard hostler that came out, was trying to move a trailer, trying to make a turn a little bit too tight. Of course, when he made that turn, that trailer started to swing back, push back, got the passenger side of my truck, got that fixed. Went off to a couple of days, and went to a wedding, and came back from the wedding. Came back, my entire left side of one of my trailers that I had parked at a yard, someone just cleaned it completely out on on the left side of that. And then on top of that, I was parked again, unloading at another facility, and another driver. It wasn't this time. It wasn't as bad, but they backed into the driver's side of my truck. But I'm saying that to say, this was my question with the scenario with my trailer. I got lucky because I was on a smaller yard, and I was able to track down who it was that hit me. But the person did not report it to their insurance company. What happens? And well, there's several things that maybe to unpack here. The fear of a person to report something like that to their insurance company, because of course everybody's afraid that their insurance is going to go up or whatever. But what is the damage that can be done not only to that person, but also their future of being able to obtain insurance in the future if they don't report incidents and accidents and they know about it?
The second most important thing that an insurance company tracks with the insurance carrier is, do they report all claims? In fact, the theory here, just off the cuff theory, is that if you don't have some reported with nothing paid on it, you're not reporting them all. This is why when the insurance company likes a risk, they go into FMCSA to see if there's any reportable crashes or not. If the reportable crash is not showing up, then they have a problem here because they're not reporting it all, and that becomes a negative part. In your case, since it's happened on parked areas on private property, those would not be showing up in the federal website. But the insurance company would still have a problem with that part of it because now it's going to be reported much later. Clearly not because of what's going to happen in yours, because your case didn't get any worse than it here. If it's physical damage, you do this. But what we worry about is an injury that doesn't seem serious. They get 3 treatments or a month worth of treatments at chiropractors, get this plaintiff's attorneys, and all of a sudden it blows up and we don't get the facts that day. Meaning with the medical records early, this kind of stuff. This is why insurance companies don't do that. But it's very, very strong negative part of it. The other thing, 3 other things. This is why I like cameras, Rico. I like 360 cameras. I think we need cameras all 3 sides. It's cheap. They're only a couple $300,
right,
including the driver. Listen, I know your people are going to say, I don't want to look at me, driver. It's not an invasion of privacy. It's only when you're driving. And to get you to defend you completely in court, I've got to have all the evidence. And if I'm a plaintiff's attorney and challenging you, I would say, well, I think they were on the phone or they were listening to something here or somebody thinks they have. If I got evidence from, because I have a camera facing you while you're driving and you're not doing anything wrong, then I could get you out of the case. If you're doing anything wrong, that's going to show up in court sooner or later. They're going to subpoena your phone to see if you're on your phone when this thing happened or text us when it happened. In those cases, if we know it early enough, then we don't defend it. We don't pay lawyers $300-400 a day or hour to defend you. We go ahead and write a check for it. You know, everybody gets complaints now. Why don't you fight more? Part of the reason we don't fight more in insurance is we don't have enough documentation. And everybody hates truckers. I mean, you think of people who you rather see.
Right.
You rather sue people who have high limits. Well, truckers at least have 750, if not 1 million.
Right.
We think truckers who the jury would be afraid of. How many can you get? 10 people in federal court, 6 people in state courts that 1 or 2 of them haven't been scared by a trucker on the highway. And third, we know in 9 times out of 10 they have done something wrong, like falsified logs, like driving over the 10 hours or 11 hours or worked over 14, and that stuff's brought up in court. This is why it just prevails us, and this is crazy, Rico, because it's so important that they just got to drive within the regs and rules. I don't think hours of service rules have reduced crashes. I completely agree with what the statistics show, but they're there and they're used against us. So we just got to live with them.
So Tony, I've got another question here, going back to the fraud stuff, stealing people's identity. I'm having a hard time trying to figure out how, if a truck has stolen another carrier's DOT number and they get stopped at a roadside inspection, a scale, or they're involved in a crash, how they're getting away with it at that point. Is it not picked up by the officer that is, let's just say that he's called a truck in for a secondary inspection at the weigh scale, and bring in your paperwork, and he brings everything in. Everything has to match. Now, we do things a little bit different in Canada, I realize, but from a U.S. point of view, I steal Rico's DOT number, okay, and I'm way out of I'm way out of hours. My truck's leaking oil. It looks like a piece of garbage, and I say that I'm operating under Rico's DOT number. Is there not some documentation to back that up to prove to the officer in charge that I have a right to be using that number? Is there some, or can you just steal somebody's number at the, that you pick up at a truck stop of a truck parked there?
All right, I want to build on three things. The people who are stealing other people's DOT numbers or MC numbers are doing it for two reasons. The first reason, they're bad.
Yeah,
They've
obviously.
had bad records already. They have tractor trailers bad, can't get it. Second, they don't have the relationships with the shippers is the second thing. All you have to do, unfortunately, Chuck, is take a piece of paper, write DOT number with a magic marker on the side of your truck, put duct tape on there, and done me a one-page lease that I have a reason. I'm leased my truck to Rico, and that's all the officer looks at. They don't look at anything else. They'll look at shipping documents if they're there, but obviously the shipping documents will be in your name. If the truck's empty, they won't be in shipping documents. Will be in Rico's name. The only place they would even remotely check it if they go check insurance. And they will, and the insurance is not the federal website insurance. It's not the 91X filings. Okay. It's the report card, the insurance ID card. Well, if they've got an insurance ID card on any insurance company, they're not even going to see if it's the one that's made the 91X filing. That's how simple it is. I mean, and it's ridiculous that this happens. Now, crash is a little different because what happened crashing, in fact, I've had a risk. I get 3 or 4 of these fraud things called in the last 4 or 5 months. This is why I'm more energized than ever before of this part. They actually had one that would turn into the insurance company because if you know the system, everybody has to have a processing agent. If you know, that's one of Hank's hang up of the processing agent being in every state. That means that if there's a name or a company on every insurance company 91X filing that has someone there who receives legal documents on that motor carrier's behalf. And in this case, it's one that never got reported to the insurance company, but got reported through the processing agent part. Insurance company got it. And it wasn't their insured, it wasn't their vehicle, they didn't know anything about it, so they're denying the claim. So claims typically won't get paid because of fraudulent stealing DOT numbers, because you can defend those kind of things. It wasn't us. These kind of things, they'll keep you out of it. But the idea for the inspections, Chuck, it's just impossible to do this. Rico, I see you nodding your head. You know that's all you have to do because you've been through inspections.
So some of this could be fixed if we had a better system from the
federal.
So we need the Fed's help on this one. And this sounds like a no-brainer to fix this part of it.
Right. Keith Riddle will be at Mask. He's going to do a session at Mask with Dale Prex, who's a part of this program. He's in charge of this. I've had a couple of conversations with him. He was there last year, and I actually have had talked to him there. I've had him also on a personal one-on-one conversation with his people because the MC number is going away and things like that. That's who you have to impress. They're working on this now, Chuck. But here's the problem, Rico and Chuck. When my father got authority in 1975, what did he have to do? He had to go to Washington.
Right.
He had to prove the necessity and convenience to get that MC number or ability to haul process goods to other states. Today, you know what it takes? $300.
Yeah, I know.
There's no vending. They don't even see that they're real people. You don't even have, I'm not a robot checking in this kind of thing. They're making major moves to try to straighten that out. It's just too easy right now. And
well, where I live in Ontario, you can get a trucking license a lot easier than you can get a hunting license.
Oh, absolutely. Even my granddaughter getting her driver's license. At least there's somebody there who watches her take a test and second drives with her in a vehicle. Yeah. This is what it became too easy. And, this new internet, artificial intelligence and all, how simple it can do this kind of stuff. It's just ridiculous part of it. And there is some moves that are changing this ID where they have hired now the company that vents you when you go through TSA.
Right.
They're hiring companies now. Anybody getting new authority now will have to approve their ID, send their ID up. This policy. They just haven't now rolled it out to anybody where you have to update your 150 every 2 years to start talking about the existing people with it. And they're promising sooner or later that's going to happen, and they'll clean it up. You know, government moves slow. I mentioned getting rid of your MC numbers. Chuck, I've preached that it was a part of the 1994 termination of the ICC Act.
Right.
And it hasn't been done. We rewrote the policy forms because moving from the word from authority to lease to, because the authority was going away. It still hasn't happened.
No.
Well, it happens. I don't know, but it's going to have to happen. The federal government's developing more and more data, and all that data is under the DOT number, not the MC number. I told you we're going to be at brokers and brokers and carriers summit in Indianapolis in last week of April.
Yeah.
Part of what I'm going to talk about is the difference, because unfortunately a lot of brokers only deal with MC numbers because that's where they have to go check the MC number to make sure they have authority to haul the load and have the proper insurance filing. But the DOT number is where the statistics are. I never could understand why my father, when he was hauling cucumbers, didn't have to have proof of insurance coverage. When he was hauling pickles, he did. And when Vlasic was hauling their pickles, he didn't have to. Vlasic didn't have to have proof of insurance. Why only pick up one part of the transportation food chain entity? So what will happen is when the DOT MC numbers go away, then the private carriers who are hauling anything hazardous and the exempt haulers will have to have proof of coverage.
Right.
And you'll tie the two together.
I recently got an email, Tommy, from a third-party company, very pretty big third-party company. I think a lot of brokers use them right now to get set up with them. But they were basically offering a service to carriers now, it seems, to vet brokers, to kind of reverse the process of the same thing that a carrier has to go through to sign up to deal with the broker. They were offering some type of service. I didn't get a chance to really delve into it too much, but it's kind of, I guess I'm going to assume that it's the same process that they're offering from the broker side when it comes to vetting carriers. Now they're also offering the same type of service for a carrier to vet brokers. What do you got a take on that, or how could that be beneficial for a motor carrier out here, small guys especially that may not have the whole back office thing to be vetting brokers that they're dealing with on the spot market?
Absolutely. And again, Chuck, the gentleman in that will be at Mass, Dale PRX, I've got him there. I'll give it. He actually has a vending service, Rico, where you can do Lexus or whoever your
Lexus
message is, LexisNexis, and say, is this broker legitimate or not? And he has a database that vets the truckers. This is the way that you have to, if you're dealing with a broker that you've never dealt with before, then you can vet them. Those services are there. I don't know the one you're talking about. I do, as part of the committees that Chuck and I are going to be involved in, the task force to try to straighten this out, are going to offer this vending service part of it. But yeah, this is the way you have to do it, dealing with strange load boards, strange people. I mean, I had one, and even the big trucking company out of Jacksonville. You know what they are? Who's only operator.
Right.
They got involved in one. I got a broker, agent in North Carolina, good friends of mine. He insured my father many years ago. His father did, and a small broker took a load as a broker, gave it to a California trucking company, who then gave it to a false broker, hauled the load, delivered it, and they got paid. The false broker got paid, and then the company who hauled the load is suing them, or the company Jacksonville never got paid because the broker paid the first load. So the Jacksonville company is suing the shipper because the shipper is responsible for the payment, and the broker about this part of it, just because the broker double brokered and the broker was not legitimate.
Unfortunately, why is that? I'm just curious. I don't know if you know or not, Tommy, but I'm just curious. Why is it? Because it seems as if that company that you're speaking about out of Jacksonville, it seems as if they have bore the brunt of a lot of this fraud that's been going on. That they seem to have been like at the forefront. Or I don't know at the
I
forefront.
can tell you why. There's, they were a wonderful company. What happens is they've got these agents all over, and the agents get the place is, from my understanding, is infested with double and triple brokerage. So what happens is they will get a load from a carrier or from a customer, direct customer, and then they may not have one of their own trucks pick it up there because they're all running little brokerage operations as well. So they give it out to another carrier, or they give it out to another broker, who in turn gives it to another broker. So it ends up going through so many hands, and they're not vetting. That's part of the issue. They're not vetting to make sure that this thing is being picked. If they're giving it to Crescent carriers to pick up, they're not doing the extra work to make sure that Crescent Carriers is the one that picked it up.
And that's so unfortunate, because they used to be one of my favorite companies to.
Yeah, I agree. They've got a stellar reputation, and then they opened up a bunch of offices in overseas.
And Rico, the reason they were very favorable in the first is that they're using independent contractors, but they're giving them the contractor the backroom support, made them there. But now it's going against them, because now the independent contractor has a choice to check the load that the sales agent that checks are posting or not. And so it's not being done. They're not vetting it because of those two things that are not part of the back room. They're taking care of that. That is the sales or the independent agents that Chuck talked about, and the owner operator now, who has a choice to take the loads, any ones they want to here. And then it gets back, once the load's hauled, it gets back to the people in Jacksonville to collect the money. And all of a sudden they find out about all these problems after the fact, because they weren't involved in it up front, selecting the load.
One more real world scenario. You're a small carrier. You book a load with a broker. You go pick the load up. Broker gives you a call, says, "Hey, don't deliver on that bill of lading. I have another one." They email you a different bill of lading. That, of course, we all know, if you've been in the industry any amount of time, everybody knows, the quote unquote blind shipment.
Yeah.
But with everything that's going on in the industry, what would you advise somebody on how to handle blind shipments going forward?
Great question, Rico, because it does happen, especially in the chemical industry and hair products and all sorts of stuff.
The thing that they have to do, Rico, as far as everything that I know about, is that when they get that second, or they get the information, take time to call the person who originally gave it to them, who originally gave the load to them, and make sure it came from them. This is what's happening, because it's not now the one who gave them the original load. It's someone now who's diverting, because they picked up a load off a load board. They see there, so now they got the DOT number. They know how to call them up and say, move it to somewhere else. So you got to go back to the person who gave you the original bill of lading, the broker who gave you the original load, and make sure that second email came from them.
Okay.
We've been doing blind, I'm not with the company anymore, but we did blind shipments almost 50 years ago. They were quite common in certain industries. And what we did was, right from the start, when we were negotiating with the carrier, we would be right up front and say, listen, you're going to go in there, you're going to tell them that the load is being picked up in St. Louis and you're taking it to Chicago, but you're not taking it to Chicago. You're actually you are coming back to Toronto. But our customer doesn't. It's a blind shipment, and I will send you a bill of lading. Or you make up a bill of lading saying it's going to Toronto, and there will be papers at the border waiting for you on the U.S. side so you can get across to Canada. And we would do that, but it was always way up front, never in the middle of the race.
Right. And you just got to make sure it came from the person you received the load from. A lot of times they just go do it. One of the funniest examples here, I was talking to a trucking company who was in north of you, right across Lake Hardwell, Georgia, part of it here.
Yep.
They're hiring ex-DOT officers, and they had a risk that actually had one diverted to another thing. And they diverted from a lumber company, and they diverted to actually a job site. And this DOT officer who now is selling insurance went to the job site, showed it wasn't there, and made him take it back made him take the cost back to the lumber yard. They were supposed to. That was kind of funny. But this has happened. And you know what it is, and what it boils down to, Rico, this market is so tight out here. You need to make money. The
Absolutely.
trucker doesn't have that. And so they don't take the time to vet who they get the load from and verify these other kind of things that you hear about. Take the extra half an hour to make that call.
And I think we all guilty of it.
I know I'm guilty of it. I never read anything the first paragraph.
Tony, I have to tell you, we were guilty of it for a long time. And I signed because of this sort of behavior. I once signed a contract that I didn't realize the teeth it had in it. Now I signed lots of them, but one bit me in the backside. It cost us a lot of money. And the problem is, quite often, especially when you're working on that spot market, you don't have time, because if you don't commit to that load, you're in some Blackwell, Georgia, and there's nothing in Blackwell, Georgia that day, or anywhere for 200 miles near, and all of a sudden the load comes up. You don't have time to start saying, well, what about this? What about that? You take that load and you take your chances. Well, God knows what you're picking up. But if you start questioning it, you lose the load, because the broker's lines are lit up. He's got 800 guys that want the load.
Right.
One thing that I've done that I have noticed that helps me out a little bit, and of course, like these things are not always foolproof, but I like to try to deal with the same people that I've dealt with. Right. And a lot of times this goes back to what we talk about here on the Rates and Lanes podcast. If you're running in a specific area, a lot of times you can cut down on dealing with every Tom, Dick, and Harry that's out there on the load board. You may get loads off of the load board, but normally if you're running in the same consistent area, you can kind of develop relationships where you got people where you're dealing with that. Like I said, the loads may be coming off of the load board, but you have those relationships in place, and it kind of can help insulate you a little bit. Another thing, and Lord knows that we give them hell, and we give a lot of factoring companies hell on this podcast. But one thing, that if you do have a factoring company, hopefully they have some type of, we're talking about vetting brokers, hopefully they have some type of way where they can do credit checks. And if you can do credit checks through your factoring company, a lot of times that will also help you mitigate from dealing with an unscrupulous broker as well, because a lot of times one benefit of dealing with a factoring company is lots of times they have a lot more information that they have available to them that the load boards, sometimes the load boards, I know they try to do the best job as far as rating brokers and stuff and their credit and stuff of that nature. But a lot of times, hey, that person that's on the load board, they paid their fee to be on the load board as well, and at the end of the day, that credit score may not be updated or may not be as fresh as you think it should be. So a lot of times, by having a factoring company or having a true way to vet the broker and that nature of pulling in their credit report from those services can actually be tremendously beneficial and help you keep from dealing with fraudulent brokers.
Rico, you know what? Historically, that has been very, very accurate, except I've in the last year, because of, and one of them was a company called Convoy, they hurt one of the brokers or one of the factoring companies so badly they went broke. Right. So you know what? You can't always, you could almost go to the bank before, with a factoring company, with anything. If they said it was good, especially if it was, there's a difference between recourse and non-recourse. If there was no recourse, well, then you didn't have to worry about it, right? You pay a little bit extra for that. But now, as a rule, they do a really good job. But what you see on the load boards as far as how they're vetting credit, I have to tell you a funny story. I remember getting a call once about a broker that had gone bankrupt, and just for my own humor, I checked out that broker when I heard the news to see what their credit was like, and it was stellar. And they were bankrupt. So, you got to be really careful. I think, Rico, you are 100% right. If you run in the same areas all the time, and you can keep it down to, let's say 6 to a dozen brokers who you really avoid. It can happen. Anything can happen because it's like musical chairs. Sometimes it's catch 21. You could have a customer or a broker, it doesn't matter, and they are healthy as hell on Friday. And on Monday morning, they find out that their biggest customer just took them for $1 million and that they can't sustain that sort of a loss, and they're done. And they take everybody with them. And I think in these markets that we're starting to see now, I don't know what it's like in the USA, but I can tell you up in Canada, between the tariffs and the lackluster retail sales, we just had Canada's oldest company declare bankruptcy, which is the Hudson Bay Company, which ran,
Wow.
I think it's the oldest company in North America, if I'm not mistaken. They were fur traders in the 1700s that actually became a country and a chain of department stores. And they've lost their mojo somewhere along the line. And now it's a kind of a funny story, and I'll just give you the Reader's Digest. They went into declare bankruptcy, and things were so bad they had to get a loan in order to declare bankruptcy to liquidate the merchandise they had on in their inventory. But they started to discount everything in their stores. Sales picked up so quickly because all these Canadians wanted bargains that they didn't need the loan anymore. They were able to be self-sufficient for the bankruptcy, but they've done so well with liquidating the assets that the judge has allowed them to keep 6 stores open and keep the chain alive because they had the financial wherewithal to do it. So it's kind of a funny story, but nonetheless, we've got retail stores that are dying by the hour. My wife and I were in an outlet mall yesterday that I know that the retailers used to be in line to get in there, and there had to be 8 empty stores in that retail mall. And this is the sign of times. Now, we're going to lose about 74 of these giant Hudson Bay department stores. So they're like I guess maybe a Macy's or Lord and Taylor, so our American listeners can understand. So we're going to lose 74 out of the 80 stores. Now, those stores are choice tenants in the mall. They're the tenant. They're the anchor tenant.
The anchor, yeah.
And now all of a sudden you're going to have this giant mall. Their anchor tenant is gone. Well, what happens now? What do you do with that space? People can't live there. What are you going to do with it? It's going to be very interesting.
I have a shopping center called the Fashion Mall here in Orlando near my house. I go through it. I have to go by it every time I get out of the neighborhood. Same thing, Chuck. There's nothing there anymore. The anchor stores, Sears, Macy's went under or left there. There's just nothing there now, and you can't do anything with it. You just wonder how we got malls after malls. Now, some of them are doing well, some are not. Let me suggest one other thing, Rico. I don't know how many people listen to this, but I'd like to give them my email address, and I can give them the information about the vetting of the broker, the people and also about this program we have that they can get their CSA scores and why that's important and get these inspections. Can I do that? Okay.
Absolutely. I got another question for you, but absolutely go ahead. The floor is yours.
Well, you see my name on my picture here. It's Tommy Rook, but one word only, at AOL.com. It's easy to remember at AOL.com. So just take the name you see on the under my picture. Just one word instead of two. Tommy Rook at AOL.com, not capitalized. And I can give them some guidance about the things we have going to happen. Also, keep them abreast of the stuff the government's going to do. I passion helping smaller truckers, as Chuck will know, and you know, I've dedicated this part of my life for the last 30 years to let the insurance industry know about trucking and the trucking industry know about insurance. And I appreciate this outlet you have. But go ahead, you had another question. I just want to make sure that we got that out before we run out of time.
Absolutely. No, we're going to circle back around to that before we sign off, but to give you another opportunity to put that out there. But hot button question to maybe stir the pot a little bit. It's a hot button issue that's going on right now. Broker transparency. How does all of this stuff? I'm trying to. In my mind, I'm connecting. I'm seeing how all of this stuff is kind of intertwined and connected in some form or fashion. Does broker transparency, the big issue that's going on with broker transparency that's going on, does that tie in, or will it tie into any of and all of this information and stuff that we're talking about nowadays, that we just finished talking about with broker fraud and with transportation fraud and everything else that we're talking about? And if so, how?
Chuck, you want to answer or you want me to answer?
Go ahead. You answer, because I have my own.
Well, basically, what's happened is thing we talked about Rico already. Broker in the past, the old days, like my father was, it wasn't a problem of transparency because they knew and they had a relationship with the trucker and they were worried about keeping the trucker in business, and they were charged anything between 8 and 12% of what they got from the shipper. It was there. And what happened now is some of these unscrupulous brokers didn't do this part of it. So now, since you don't know who you're dealing with, the transparency is supposed to be there. Will that help? Yeah, because now the broker that you're dealing with will have to tell you the information they got from the shipper itself. So hopefully here, but the problem we're going to have, Rico, how many truckers are going to take the time to go look at those things, to check those things out? I mean, it can be transparency and it's there, but to get rid of the brokers who are keeping too much or not being honest with the trucker, this kind of stuff here. But, it boils down to my opinion, who you're dealing business with and can you trust them or not here.
Well,
so you got a government fix put in here because to help you know who you're doing business with. That's the thing.
The thing that I asked that, the reason why I brought that up and asked that question, because I forget but TQL is going through the lawsuit right now, and it's kind of in the forefront. And I do think there is one thing that I think that should happen with all brokers and stuff of that nature is there should definitely be a separation of funds to help protect people, the loads that they've been, at least for the contracted rate. I'm not saying that I don't need to know exactly what a broker made on a load. As long as what I negotiated on it is covered and protected, then I'm fine with that portion. And what I'm saying about that is, if for instance, if I book a load with broker ABC for $1,000, I think that $1,000 should be put in a separate account to make sure that money is available for me to be paid. And whatever their commission above and beyond that $1,000 that I negotiated on and accepted, I don't care. I really don't care. I accepted and was willing to move the load for the $1,000. I just want to make sure that my $1,000 is covered, that I negotiated for. And I think that those funds should be segregated from the daily operational funds of brokers. That's just my opinion on that.
Rico, you are 100,000% right. Okay. As a matter of fact, when a broker goes to a bank now, the banks have gotten smarter. So if a broker has a line of credit from the bank, a good banker, and I think it's pretty standard now, they'll look at a company and they'll say, well, you do $60 million a year, that's fine. But they realize that that $60 million, that $60 million isn't their money. There's only 10% of that money, which is $6 million, that is theirs. Okay, so they treat it a lot differently. They don't treat it as $60 million in sales.
Right.
Now, where this gets sticky, I can tell you, because in Ontario, that was the legislation here. Not that there was nobody to enforce it. A left-wing government that we had come in here about 35 years ago passed that law, but just like everything else they didn't understand what they were doing, and they didn't understand how to enforce it, so nothing could be done to fix it. That's the problem when you get a left-wing government. But the real problem is when you have a company, which most of the companies that we dealt with at Traffics took much longer to pay us than what we took to pay the factoring company or the trucker direct. Now, when we're dealing with truckers directly, there were a lot of deals that we negotiated where we would do quick pays. We started off doing them for free. Here, you know what? You need the money right away. Just come in and get a check. We were doing that 45 years ago. And we were able to get great truckers, great rates, because they knew they could deal with Traffics, and it was like going to the bank.
Right.
Okay. So it would be very hard. Back in those days, customers paid their bill in about 35 days. Now, today, your big companies, your automotive companies and your big multinationals, they can take 60 to 180 days to pay.
Right.
And there's another issue you run into. I cannot run a company on 8 or 10 or 12% and wait 180 days for my money and pay a salesman and pay a dispatcher and pay for my rent on my building or my my expenses on the building I own, my mortgage payment on with that little bit of money. I need higher than 12 to cover the 180 degree, because now all of a sudden I've been put in a position where I'm no longer a broker, I'm a banker. And I never wanted to be a banker when I was a little boy. It's not one of the things but you become one, unfortunately. So that's where you have a problem with that. It's a great thing. And my next thing is with all of this, who the hell is going to enforce this? Let's be real, guys. You don't even enforce, you know what? You can't even catch murderers, in Canada or the US. We can't, we have a whole catch and release thing. We let out these criminals all the time. Who's enforcing this? You can pass all the laws you want, but let's get realistic.
Right.
Rico, that's the same thing here. I agree exactly what you said. If I accepted a load for X dollars, who cares how much the broker made?
Right.
I accepted that load. The transparency will be threefold. And my thought, the first thing is going to prohibit a trucker contractually, a broker contractually, to say a trucker, you don't have the right to know that information. So you have the right now. That's going to be the part of it here where.
Well, that was supposedly already all in the law.
I know. It's just it goes back to that's why I'm going to take. That's my second thing. But who's going to enforce it? This is the problem you have here. What in? And I agree. Insurance agencies have a trust fund. They can't spend their premium because when I collect your premium, I get 45 days to pay. So it's a trust fund. The other thing that you involved in here, so if they do that, they're trying to push this back to the bonding companies who post a $75,000 bond, which would be, and there's a lot of people now, because Hank's been involved in this, and he and I've had this discussion. These bonding companies now aren't going to bond the truck brokers anymore because the government's talking about making them an aggregate responsibility. I mean, it's now an aggregate, meaning that the most you can have to ever pay is $75,000 for any one trucker. They're going to make it a per occurrence, making every $75,000 for every one of the collectible part of it here. And this is going to just ruin. You won't be able to get a broker bond anymore. So this is where the government's, and so how they come out with that. But it gets back again, Rico, who you're doing business with.
Right.
And you like check, you're going to have the fraudulent no matter what. But most of them, if you know who you're doing business with, one of the things we use from underwriting, I mentioned, if you have to make too many certificate insurances out, for any trucker, meaning send it to so many shippers, depending on the unit. Now, they don't have a business plan. They don't know what they're doing because they don't know who they're doing with consistently. And that's one of the things that I've always suggested underwriting, find out how many people they're doing business with, how many people are dependent on their services, because then they usually have a good relationship with those brokers. Because Chuck will tell you, my father protected the trucker. He made sure he got enough money from Vlasic to keep the truckers that he's using in business, part of it. So he felt his negotiation with Vlasic was that important to make sure there's enough revenue to keep the truckers happy. And by the way, Chuck, he charged 5% if he had to give an advance.
Well, gentlemen, unfortunately, we're going to have to leave it right there. The time has flown by on us.
Wow.
We've gotten to that point of the show. But I definitely appreciate you, Tommy, for coming on and sharing your wealth of knowledge and information with us. Once again, before we get out of here real quickly, if you don't mind, let people know how they can find you and get in contact with you once again.
Again, you got my name under my picture, Tommy Ruke at AOL.com. One word, Tommy Ruke at one word, AOL.com.
Pretty easy.
And Chuck, I tell you, it has been fascinating, and this hour has definitely blown by, but it definitely is a fascinating discussion. Maybe we might be able to pick up on it again here in the future, but let the folks know how they can find you and get a hold of you as well.
Yes, if you need me for anything, just send me an email, chucksnow280@outlook.com. Put your phone number on it, and I will get back to you as soon as I can. I'll be at Matt's this week, so I won't be able to get back to people as quickly as possible. But who knows? You may bump into me over at down in Louisville. And with that, Rico, I'll let you back her in a hole for another week.
Good deal. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are always eternally grateful for you guys sharing your time with us, spending some time with us. You could have been anywhere else in the world, but you took some time to hang out with us. And like I said, we're always grateful for you doing so. If you would, do us a huge, huge favor. Please like, share, and subscribe to the show. It doesn't cost you anything. It doesn't sign you up for anything. It just helps us get out into a broader algorithm, helps get the show out to more people. So if you do that, we greatly appreciate it. And with that being said, we want you guys to continue to stay safe out there, stay healthy, keep it in between the mustard and the mayonnaise. And God willing, we'll talk at the same time, same place next week. God bless you and good night.
Catch you on the flip-flop. God bless. Good night. Thank you.
Thanks again, Tommy.